Right. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to this evening's conversation between myself, Emma Mentel, and Evelyn Alessandri. And I'm so happy that there's so many of you joining us um, for this evening's conversation. Some of you have met me as a practitioner, or maybe in the days when I had a health shop. But for those of you who don't know me, I will explain a little bit more about myself later on when Evelyn has told us her story. This is such an important discussion about healing cancer in a way that I think is requires so much courage and something that's a little bit more out the box than what is always known. And I heard about Evelyn's story a few weeks ago and decided to contact her. And then the two of us got chatting, and we decided that we will have an evening where we can have people join in the conversation between myself and Evelyn. I'm delighted to have this opportunity for you all to join in and to listen about ways in which one can empower yourself. I've always believed that a client or a patient should be an empowered and active participant on their healing journey, regardless of the diagnosis. I also just wanted to clarify for the purposes, sorry, I'm just going to let somebody in. I might just have to now and again interrupt myself to let people in from the waiting room. So I just wanted to state at the start of our talk that by no means are we making recommendations for specific remedies or for dosages. This is Evelyn's story, which I think is a story of hope. So we are not being paid by any company to promote any particular products. We're not here to make individual recommendations. It's more just to find ways to start gaining knowledge and to find other ways of looking at something. So I'm sorry, there are a few latecomers, which just letting in. There we go. Great. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Emma Mentel. I'm a qualified dietitian. I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I work with the Scio device. I've done some natural energy healing courses and all the bits and pieces. And I have a particular interest in the role of nutrition, but also the holistic approaches to well-being and healing. So I'm always very excited to find clients or individuals who've really made a health journey their own, who've taken a real personal interest and responsibility in finding something that works for them and then have an amazing story to tell. So it's with real gratitude for Evelyn for joining us this evening and telling her story. And I'm really so excited to introduce Evelyn to those of you who haven't met her. And I'm sure you're going to find it so inspiring, and there's a lot for her to share with us this evening. So I'm going to hand over to Evelyn. Thank you, Evelyn. Oh, Evelyn's frozen.
Oh,
there we go.
Is that better? I felt like I needed to clap when you said, and I hand over to Evelyn, but no, it's me, so I won't clap because that's rude. Thank you, Emma, and thank you for inviting me to be on this conversation with you. I do want to emphasize, I know you've said it, but I want to make sure that the people listening understand that what I'm sharing today is what worked for me. So the decisions I made, the research I did, and what resonated with me. So I'm not going to provide you with scientific backup and all the details, because I really believe in my heart that we're all different, and what works for me might not work for you. So please bear that in mind. I'm also, we have such a short time, so I'm not going to share my whole story, but hopefully I've chosen moments that have impacted my life and hopefully will inspire you going forward, not just dealing with cancer, but in life in general. So there I was, fit, healthy, feeling fabulous, on top of the world one day, and the next day I'm being diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. You can imagine, in fact, I give myself goosebumps when I say that out loud, because you can imagine the shock that that brings. And I can actually remember the words coming out of the doctor's mouth as he told me my diagnosis. And I do giggle because I literally went like this, like I lifted my hands, like stop talking, because I could feel the blood draining from my brain, and I literally ran to his examination bed and I lay down, and he was a bit confused, like, what's going on here? And I said, I'm going to faint. Just shows you how our body is affected by shock. Anyway, I was so grateful because I didn't know him, and he just had this most amazing, gentle bedside manner, and he stroked my leg saying, don't worry, don't panic, I have a plan, I'm going to get it all out. And so, are you sure? Will you? You know, this is not nice. You know, I want it all gone. I want it out my body. And yes, Evelyn, yes, don't panic, don't panic. Anyway, I managed to get off the bed, and we were chatting over his desk, and he started to explain what it was he'd found. He showed me photographs, and then he said to me, do you want to write it down? So I think there were 3 parts to it. I can't really remember. And this voice in my head said no. And so I said no. And he looked at me with absolute shock, like, you know, why not? And then I must find myself thinking, why not? And then I thought, I don't want to give it a label. This thing is going. It's not staying. You know, there's no home for it. I don't need a label. And then I said to him, and sorry, but what about Dr. Google? And he sort of smirked, and I said, you know that I'm going to Google, my husband's going to Google, and so are all my friends. How is that going to serve me? And so he had a giggle and he said, yes, okay, good point. You know, I'm sorry I asked, you don't need to write it down. So to this day, 3 years later, I actually couldn't tell you what cancer it was. All I know is that it was stage 3 colon cancer. So we left his offices and drove home in silence, in, you know, absolute shock. And I think there was a realization for me that this wasn't just my journey. This was also my husband's journey, and I get emotional just thinking about it. I had to go home and tell our daughter that I had stage 3 colon cancer. And that was even more traumatic than hearing the news. So what we did was we cried for 3 days. We covered every question, the what if I die, what is going to happen now, why me? And it gave me a chance to be really vulnerable and process every thought that was going through my mind, which at the time I didn't think was significant. But how often in life does something horrible happen, and we just keep going, we keep soldiering on, we pick up our big girl brookies, we don't actually like let it pass through our bodies, if you like. And so yes, we had a spectacular pity party, I like to call it. And when we felt like we could breathe and we were no longer really feeling like victims, you know, we had been there, done that, covered it. It's now like, what now? And which reminds me of a book I had just read. I don't know if anybody's read that book called The Gift by Edith Eger. She was a Holocaust survivor, and one line in her book really resonated with me, and it said, when shitty things happen in life, you don't ask why me, you ask what now. And that's what we did. We said, what now? And we walked, I say out of there because we literally did sit in one room for 3 days. We decided 3 things. The first is that we would make the decision as a unit, because after all, it's not just me, it's also them. They're also having to process. So every decision we would have a family meeting. The second thing was that we would take it one step at a time, one day at a time. And that is something that I've used more and more every day, because we time travel into the future worrying about what's going to happen when we actually have no control. And I often ask myself, what do you need right now? So when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, what do you need right now? Actually, I'm tired and I need a nap, and I will go and have a nap. Or I need to go for a walk. I need to clear my head. I need to be in nature, whatever it is. I stop what I'm doing. It doesn't matter how important it is. And I listen to what it is I need right now. And that's what we did every day with every single step. And believe me, there were some very frightening steps. And then the third thing was really my decision, and that was that I was not enjoying the fear of it. And I was determined not to let that fear rule me. And I said, I'm not making any decisions when I feel afraid or I feel like I'm stuck in this emotional washing machine of fear, which was all fair and good. But now, how was I going to do that? And I thought, you know, one thing that was clear, and I mean, in life, it happens all the time, is, have you noticed when you have a negative thought about something and you let your brain play with that negative thought, you can make a movie. Well, let me tell you that I actually felt like I was going to be an Oscar winner with this magnificent motion picture going on in my head. Boy, I had worked out every scenario, and I thought, I have to stop this noise. And how am I going to do that and make proper decisions? And I forced myself to breathe. And people go, oh, breathe, that's easy. It's not easy to breathe. It's not easy to consciously breathe. And thinking back, I was almost like a teacher teaching a child, because I was like, Evelyn, you will sit in this chair and you will breathe. You will quieten this mind. I don't, it was that type of internal dialogue that was happening. And so I thought, okay, I've got to keep my mind busy. So I would literally watch my chest rise and fall as I breathed. And then I would think, okay, there's a bit of a rhythm going here. And the next thought would be, I'm actually breathing in more than I'm breathing out. So now my brain is busy. It's got something to do, but it's all related to breathing. And so I carried on until I thought, gosh, I'm actually feeling quite calm. This isn't so bad. And then I started to think really positively, like, I'm not a victim. I never have been. And I've been through stuff in my life, and it's made me stronger. It hasn't killed me. And maybe this is part of my journey. And maybe I need to look at it as life lessons, and what is it that I'm going to learn from this, and trust. Actually, this is a big thing as well, is that trust that life is happening for me and not to me. And now I sit here doing the job I do. So I mean, that was just for me a moment where my positivities actually led the whole episode to come to this point. Anyway, so now I'm feeling calm, and I'm back in control, I think, of my life. And I've had 6 weeks of rest. I had actually no. I'm jumping ahead, because firstly I had to have the operation, so I had to get the tumor out. And that is quite a story on its own, one of which I don't have time to do today, but if you want to read the story, it is on my website, on my blog. But there's something at the hospital that happened that I wanted to share. And that is, while I was in ICU, there were 6 of us, so 5 other ladies. And I had nothing to do but just watch people watch, love people watching. But I became an observer of human nature. And one of the things that really made me sad was, of the 6 ladies in that room, none of them did anything to help themselves. So there I was lying with this cut from my tummy to my pubic bone. I had no stomach muscles. I had pipes and drains everywhere. But when the physio arrived, as hard as it was, I let her unplug me. I let her roll me out of bed. I took the 2 steps that I had to take for that day. I blew into a funny little toy, and I got back into bed. And this happened twice a day. But I knew that taking those steps, taking ownership of my journey, would help my recovery. But yet these ladies lay there. They wouldn't do physio. Sometimes they refused their medication. Sometimes they refused to eat. I mean, the lady I remember next to me had been there for 6 weeks with pneumonia. And yet some days she wouldn't even get out of bed to go to the loo. And I mean, for me, that was just like, really, really, had those ladies handed their life to medicine? I don't know. Why were they not taking any steps to help themselves? And now it's something that I talk to people a lot about, because we can choose whatever path we want, but we have to believe that it's the right one for ourselves, and then take baby steps to improve it. So that is what I was doing, was just helping I need to get better and get out of here. So I did, and 6 weeks in bed recovering, and doing my breathing and feeling fabulous and ready for the next step. And then we went to the oncologist. And that's quite terrifying. I'm sure they actually, I'm sure they get a degree in how to scare the hell out of you. Anyway, he spoke a little bit about my diagnosis, and then he asked me, Evelyn, how tall are you? So I told him, and then he said, and what do you weigh? So I told him that. And then he started to tell me about my treatment. And I was sitting there thinking, how can you decide what chemo I'm going to have when you don't have all the facts in front of you? I started to feel a little bit like I was just a number. And every time he mentioned the word chemo, the hairs on my arms stood up. And I did think, well, maybe this is my body talking to me. So when we got up to leave, he said, okay, my lady Maggie will phone you to make an appointment for you to come and have your port put in. And I found myself saying, no, I'll phone you when I'm ready. And out I walked, boy, shoulders back. I was fully in control. And I remember Richard laughing at him because he was so angry. He had smoke coming out of his ears. He was muttering under his breath, a money-making racket. He was going off. And I was thinking, I can't even take a Panado with having something to eat first. How is my body going to cope with such heavy drugs? And so began our investigation. And it's amazing when you don't conform, or when I say not conform, but if you don't go with the flow and you start to question the information you're given, it's amazing how much you learn. And so Richard and I had great fun researching what other options were there. And honestly, what led me was my gut. If I came across something that felt like it was right for me, I took it on, or I did it, or I chose to do it. If it didn't, I let it go. I was very careful about who I spoke to, because I do believe there are a lot of negative Nancys out there who love to spread doom and gloom. I was not interested. So we researched and we researched, and what I started to think, or what made sense to me, is that when you have chemo, they tell you it kills off all the cells. And that didn't make sense in my mind. I'm like, well, how do the bad rogue, I call them green cells, how do we get rid of it? And I mean, how do the sorry, I'm all teeth now. How do the good cells get an opportunity to fight off the bad if everything's been killed? So that was my logic, and that's what drove my research. Is everything and anything that would feed my cells made sense to me. And then there were a couple of things that I heard over and over again. So I thought, okay, that's worth looking at. And then I think what happened was we got to a certain point and I thought, okay, we've done a lot of research. I now need a plan. I need something to move forward with. So again, I sat quietly and did my conscious breathing and thought, okay, I need a plan. And it came like this. As a person who has been involved with holistic healing for many years, I knew I needed to have healers. I needed to go and have healing sessions. I knew 4 really strong ladies, and so I went to 1 a week. That was the first step on my plan. The second was to find a homeopath that could give me the supplements I needed. I also happened to already have one, and he was very careful to watch my soul, because I think you know, it's all about the treatment and getting better, but like what is happening inside. So he helped me with that. And then I needed a form of treatment, and I came across the doc, and he's in this room tonight. Thank you for being here. An alternative doctor who has a Rife machine, and a Rife machine is a machine that kills cells that are not vibrating at the right level. So that made sense to me, and that gave me what's the word? Confidence that I was doing something powerful to help myself. And then finally, I needed to have an oncologist who would let me do my own thing. I knew that, well, my surgeon had kept telling me it was a journey, and I knew it was going to be a journey, and I knew I would have to have someone who could keep their eye on me, do the blood tests, do the scans, and whatever else I needed, to at least give me an idea that I was moving in the right direction. So I found this amazing woman who said, okay, Evelyn, you can have 6 months to do your own thing, but after that, you and me are going to talk about plan B. And I said, yes, in fact, perfect, I'm happy with that. And what she did then was do a whole lot more tests on what had been found. And she came back to me and she said, you know, your cancer's rare. And I hate to admit this, but at the time, I felt so, what's the word? I felt special. Hell, I've got rare cancer. You know, it was almost like, well, if you're going to do it properly, you might as well, you know, go big or go home. And she said, I would have had to give you chemo and really just hope for the best. I wouldn't be sure that it would work or not. And then she taught me something that I never knew before, and that is that every chemo drug starts with a plant base. Isn't that an interesting fact? So I went off to my homeopath and said, find me the plant base, please. And he did, and I ended up taking a product that came from the UK, which is basically blueberries and blackberries in a very high concentration. So I felt like, okay, I've medicated myself in a good way. I've got a treatment that I know is going to work. I've got these healers on my side, and I absolutely believed in my plan. And I think that's also something that I really want to emphasize is whatever you choose, if you're going through cancer, or if you know somebody who's going through cancer, or even with your life challenges, when you decide, what's my plan? What am I going to do next? Choose what's best for you and then go for it. And I think at this point, I realized that, you know, we hear you're on your own journey. And that all sounds very cliche, but when you are diagnosed with cancer, it's crystal clear that we are on our own journey. Because even though I had support from family, support from friends, I now had knowledgeable people in my tribe, if you like, advising me. I had to be 100% sure that if my plan didn't work, that I wasn't going to be bitter and twisted, because this was the decision that I had made, and it was for me, and I'm not going to now start doubting it. If it doesn't work, I've got a plan B with the oncologist. Not that that ever came into my mind, but I just knew it's my journey. These are the choices that I'm making for the good of myself. And obviously, Richard and Gabriella were behind me 100%, and I truly trusted the people that were in my tribe. And now, so that was 3 years ago, and I took various things. Whatever I was guided to take, I took, and I'm so happy to say that 3 years down the line, I'm totally cancer-free. And I believe that my mind is probably, or was and is, still is, the most important tool, if you like, to keep a check on yourself regularly, is such a useful thing. Like every day I checked in. How are you feeling today, Evelyn? Like literally I would have conversations with myself. Are you feeling like a victim? You know, some days I was like, I blamed, you know, other things, and I did have pity parties and I did have moments of negativity, but I got over it. I was like, okay, you've had a bit of that, now let's move on. You know, you're going to get through this. And having that positive attitude and just going back to the baby steps, just do what's good for you now, has got me through. And it's something that we can all use in life. And the last thing really that I wanted to share is it's also very important that you surround yourself with the right tribe. I did a monumentous clean out after COVID, after cancer and COVID, because of course it was during COVID. But it's very clear the friends that support, love, uplift, help from a good place. And since then, I surround myself with those people. I'm very quick to walk away from toxic individuals. And I think that's also in life, is to have the right tribe around you is very important. So I hope, gosh, I feel like I've blurted out a whole lot of stuff, but I hope that the messages I've shared have been inspiring. I think if I wanted anything for you to walk away with tonight, is that every single day we are faced with choices, whether they're big or small, and it is so important to decide what is good for me. Is this decision good for me? Is this choice good for me? Because only you can do your life, and every choice has an outcome. So going forward, just take a moment to breathe, consciously breathe. If you need help, phone me. Yeah, breathe and then decide, is this good for me? So yeah, Emma, I hope that has given you enough of my story. I did mention to you earlier that I am about to launch a podcast that has the whole story, and also very many other stories, success stories. You know, this is, oh, sorry, also something that I did want to mention is that, you know, cancer, we think cancer is all about dying, but honestly, since I started this journey, I've heard so many success stories that it worries me that we think cancer is a death sentence. I mean, I had a lady that I was coaching yesterday. Actually, she coached me because she said 20 years ago, her husband was diagnosed and given 2 months to live. And now it's 20 years down the line and he is thriving. So, you know, don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. There are so many success stories and there are so many therapies and options available to heal. So please do your research and choose what's best for you. Thanks, Emma. I think I've I've said enough.
We might come back to you. Thank you so much, Evelyn. You know, as I said, I felt it was so important to have this conversation, because more than anything these days, we need to be reminded of stories of hope, stories that speak of courage, stories that speak of defying the odds. And so it really is wonderful to have um, people like you to tell the story. And as I was saying to you earlier, before we started this live call, when I worked in the provincial hospitals as a dietitian, I used to be on ward rounds and between ICU or surgical wards, and also oncology wards. And what struck me, I was very young and naive, and I was still very much caught up in the sort of whole Western medicine approach to everything. But what used to surprise me, and believe it or not, in those days, I used to be very quiet and very shy, but I wanted to ask questions and I wanted to understand, you know, if a doctor or a professor would say, we're doing this, this, and this with a patient, I wanted to know why, or I wanted to understand why they wouldn't consider nutrition or certain nutrients. And even then, and that is 30 something years ago, many are, and this is not an anti-medical sort of conversation. It was just interesting for me that doctors didn't take kindly to being asked questions. And I was actually hauled over the coal several times, even called in by the superintendent of the hospital to say, you know, you're not supposed to be questioning the doctors. And because my own health at the time also wasn't the greatest, I wanted to know what was going on. And so I always say to my clients now, and up to this day, and even when I had kids, that it's your body, it's your health, it's part of your responsibility. And if you don't understand something, you have to ask the questions. That doesn't mean that you are, sorry, I'm just relating someone in. That doesn't mean that you don't believe what you're being told. But I think what Evelyn illustrated so powerfully in her story is that, you know, she connected with her own body, with her own thoughts, with her own emotions, and that got her to think outside of the confines and restrictions of just something she was being told to do or not to do. And I want to repeat this, you know, we are all, or we should all strive to be empowered and informed participants on our healing journeys, regardless of the diagnosis. And that means that, yes, don't overwhelm yourself with Google, but make sure that you ask enough questions so that you know where to start tuning in to information, where to start finding out more, maybe start to find out what alternatives are. Because if you're not going to ask, then it is like saying, I want to drive from Durban to Johannesburg, and there's just one route. That means that you're not, you know, if you wanted maybe to drive through the Drakensberg, you're going to miss all of that because the freeway just takes you all the way straight up to Joburg. And sometimes you want to go the scenic route or road. Also, I think what for me stood out with listening to your story, Evelyn, and that's something that so few people have the courage to do, is to feel and to process. And in my practice, I always talk about, you know, our body expresses a combination of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Um, components. So when we want to consider healing opportunities or modalities, we really should consider also what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what spiritual practices you are doing. It's not just a case of, take this medicine 3 times a day and that is it. Very often, our minds are so burdened by negative thoughts. When you open the internet or social media, it's bad news. There's emotions that we feel that we don't want to feel because it's uncomfortable in society. Makes it really difficult to feel. It's just like, just whatever it is, don't go into the feelings, take something to numb. And then from a spiritual point of view, and I think that's one of our greatest tools these days, as to whatever that is for you, whether it's prayer or meditation or yoga or walking in nature or breathing or meditation. And Joe Dispenza has done the most incredible research that they've done. They've recently released the documentary called Source, and that is about people on one of his extensive retreats and doing incredible and interesting scientific research about what happens to cells when people meditate. So there are so many ways in which we can approach this. And I'm just going to share with you very briefly. I'm not going to go through all the slides, but a few years ago, I attended an integrative oncology seminar, and there was sort of a few basics about nutrition that I think everybody can benefit from, regardless of whether you're well or not well. But this was done by Dr. Helen Muir. So I'm just going to share her slides, just some of the basics that I would want to encourage people to look at. So let me just find this screen. Right. In this particular slide, it's just more a case of what to exclude. So again, I want to say that I would say whether you're well or not well, or facing a particular diagnosis or not, these are the kind of foods or toxins that will weaken all cells. It's sugar, and of course, sugar is everywhere. Dairy in particular, they've seen is not great for somebody trying to heal from cancer. Gluten, and that I teach about gluten and have taught about gluten, I feel, for longer than anybody else. I feel gluten is not what it used to be. And it's one of the things that I recommend that everybody eliminates from their diet, whether it's just with obesity or whether it's with hypertension or whether that's with skin conditions. That's specifically also in the field of oncology. Smoked or preserved meat, they've often talked about and for a long time mentioned the nitrites and the preservatives in processed meat. Artificial sweetener, the aspartames and all the other nasty chemicals that they use to sweeten food and drinks. And then highly processed food or overly processed food. So those are the kinds of things that, whether you're sitting here as a well individual who wants to prevent cancer or somebody with a diagnosis who's trying to give your healthy cells the best chance of maintaining health, those are the kinds of things to eliminate. And then what to have? What are the kinds of nutrients we should consider? What are the kinds of foods that people should consider? And this is from an integrative approach. Dr. Helen Muir at the time, and this is how she treated her patients with cancer, said 60% greens, 3 to 6 cups of greens a day. Now that's a lot, but I've heard of other incredible healing stories that had nothing to do with cancer that also responded incredibly well. And then 1 cup of color, so that'll be red vegetables, 1 cup white, that could be something like cauliflower or cabbage, and then also a cup cruciferous. So your broccoli, we know the broccoli and the cauliflower, the cruciferous vegetables are very, very potent in terms of supporting the liver and providing a very strong and concentrated form of nutrients. So that's a lot of vegetables, preferably organic, but if you can't find organic, then I usually recommend that people use some kind of vegetable cleaner or soaking their produce in something like white vinegar and some bicarb to remove any of the chemicals that was grown in. She said at the time 2 fruits. I would probably go more with fruits like the berries, blueberries, or other berries, just because they are so concentrated in nutrients. But depending on the patient and depending on whether they're insulin resistant or not, she said 2 fruits a day. And then the good fats. Of course, our Western diet is very full of things like canola oil, sunflower oil, very highly inflammatory fats. A lot of people over the years have swapped butter for margarine, and those are all the very inflammatory fats. So the good fats to incorporate would be things like olive oil, preferably organic, cold pressed olive oil, the coconut oil, butter, ghee, lard, cream, and coconut cream. Cream from dairy, and often people say to me, why is that not dairy? Cream is the fat part of the dairy, so it's very different compared to having a lot of milk and a lot of cheese. So good fats will actually help to arm the cells, will actually help to be anti-inflammatory, whereas your canola oil, your sunflower oil, your margarines, and your highly processed or hydrogenated fats would create a lot of inflammation where there's already a lot of inflammation when someone has cancer. Then free-range organic meat. This is again something that I tell everyone, not just people who've had a big diagnosis like cancer. Free-range meat or meat that is free of excess hormones is something that we should all be considering. So your pasture-fed or free-range grass-fed meat. People think red meat is bad for you. I think it's bad for you when you're having meat that's not free range. Your proper free range chicken and eggs and your fatty fish twice a week was what she found was really beneficial. It's not always easy to find great quality fish, but depending on where you are and if you know the local fishermen, or perhaps I've got a beautiful store around the corner and they sell great fish. I look for fish and you can just Google that, the fish that's lower in heavy metal. So some fish can be quite heavy metal heavy, and I would stay away from that. But in general, regardless of where you are at now, look for your free range, hormone-free options from children right to adults and the elderly. And then when it comes to water, again, it's been an interesting thing for me I think that tap water is so full of so many things that's foreign to the body, and we don't know if your cells actually can recognize that as water. So I like to think of the purest form of water that's available. And I would imagine a stream right at the top of the mountain, the farmland around that, or the land around that isn't sprayed with any chemicals. So this water bubbles from deep inside the earth, comes through the rocks and the earth full of minerals. And as that stream comes out, it's pure. Now, that's the kind of water that I always think our cells will recognize as water. By the time we open a tap, unfortunately, it's had a lot of chlorine put in. So the water is clean, but it's also full of chemical. And then we don't know the quality of the pipes that this water gets transported in. So is it full of all kinds of metals? Is it kind of all kinds of other things? You know, yes, maybe there's no bacteria or pathogens in the water, but it's also full of all kinds of other things. So I always tell my clients to get a water filter that they can attach to the tap, not just the jug filters, because they don't remove everything, but the sort of countertop, like an H2O, a type of filter. And again, I'm not here to sell and make, but that's just worked for me for decades. And I just replace the cartridge from time to time. So get something that has a carbon filter and that can purify your water of any of the added things. And when you then hydrate, you know that your body gets the proper hydration. So that's just a very brief summary of the kind of nutritional approaches that I would encourage. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Then from a nutritional point of view, there's so many things that I look at. I'll look at the individual, I'll look at their gut health, and whether we need to restore that. And then vitamin D. I think vitamin D is the one nutrient that I feel I can really highlight and point out as something that would be a very specific consideration. Most people don't have optimal levels of vitamin D, and it can be part of so many conditions, or low vitamin D, especially cancer. So when you go for your blood tests, ask them to also look at your vitamin D. Optimal levels will be around 80. Very often the lab tests come back, the reports come back, and it'll say normal, and somebody might have a level of, say, 30 to 40. That's maybe in the low normal range. It's not optimal. If you want to get your cells really resilient and strong, you want to have closer to, Patrick Holford even says, up to 100 of the vitamin D3 measurement. So there are, of course, all kinds of other markers one can look at, but I would say vitamin D is the one for me that stands out as something that I would want all my clients to know. It's like, know your levels. We also know recently in the last few years with COVID, people who had low vitamin D levels didn't have a very resilient immune system. So it'll be, your immune system is part of how you're going to be fighting all kinds of things, not just viruses, but also something more serious like cancer. And then there was one other mention before I finish, and that was green tea. Green tea definitely was shown to be beneficial in terms of preventing cancer, but also as part of recovering from cancer. Very high levels of antioxidants, yes, and some oncologists might say you can't have this if you're also having chemotherapy. There are very specific guidelines that one can look at, like just don't have the nutrient the day before, day of, and the day after, if you perhaps are receiving chemotherapy or considering. So there are ways around it, and some oncologists are really willing to work with their patients to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it, so that you don't just say, don't take anything at all. You still want your healthy cells to be healthy, and you still want to have a good recovery after chemotherapy. We've come to, and I know it sounds like we're just rambling and rushing. We've come to the end of our hour. And if you have, Evelyn, I don't know, you can say how many questions maybe you can answer. I'm sure there's going to be many questions. But I wanted just to mention before we finish maybe with a question or two, is that Evelyn, I thought that perhaps we could, in time, in the next few weeks, consider a kind of a workshop, something where we can go deeper and have more conversation around and work very constructively with some ideas on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. So this is not the last time we're going to be meeting online, in case you feel you're not going to have time to have all your questions answered. This, I think, is the first of hopefully many gatherings. But Evelyn, I don't know if you want to answer or ask
I'm happy.
anything.
Yeah.
Sure.
If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Does anyone have? I think you can raise your hand. I see there's one here from Monette. Did your healing include a parasite detox or any kind of conversion relating to parasites? Yes, most definitely. In fact, I still take it. I take I call it chlorine. What is it? Chloride dioxide solution. I'm probably getting it wrong. Doc, what is it? It's called CDS. It's a mineral solution that basically cleans your blood of parasites, and I still take it today. Robin, maybe Emma can just unmute you for 1 second, because I never. Yeah.
There we are. Yeah, chlorine dioxide solution.
Thank
you.
It
used to be called MMS before, Miracle Mineral Solution, developed by Jim Humble. They used it for centuries to purify water in Europe, and then he discovered that it did other things and studied it. And then Andreas Kalker, a doctor from Switzerland, developed it further into what is now known as CDS, chlorine dioxide solution, which is made from basically a natural mineral, which is sodium chlorite with a TE, and citric acid, lemon juice, or hydrogen peroxide. Sorry, not hydrogen peroxide. What's this, the acid in the stomach?
Hydrochloric acid.
Hydrochloric acid, yeah. A 4% hydrochloric acid. Yeah. Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Everybody take it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even my father, who's 87, takes it to keep his blood clean. So, yeah, highly recommend it. Where would we get that? Well, Robin sells it.
I've got.
So if you'd like his details, let me know. I have actually looked around at health shops. Not everyone does have it, but if you want to contact me, my cell number's on there. I'll give you Robin's number and he'll send it to you. Yes, we got a yes, please. So Brigitte, I've got your details. I will definitely send you the information. Is there anything else anybody else has? I think one last thing that I wanted to mention is, you know, our bodies have its own innate way of helping us to heal. You know, it's, if you think about it, this mechanism that we have, for want of a better word, beats our heart, and regulates our breathing and heals our cuts. And it really can help heal if you're in a state of calm. So I spoke a lot about breathing, and when we go over to that parasympathetic state of our nervous system, our body steps in to heal. So I could talk about breathing a lot, but it definitely helps. Don't underestimate the body's ability to help heal itself.
Absolutely. And it's actually, it's something that I teach a lot with fasting. Fasting is obviously not for everybody, or if you're severely ill, maybe not. But, the body is designed to heal, and even sometimes a fast. And they've done some incredible research with fasting pre and post chemotherapy, and found that people who had done some fasting just before their chemotherapy actually tolerated it better. So that autophagy state that we get into at around 18 hours or so can put the body in a healing state. We don't have to completely discount, the effect of nutrition, eating or not eating. I see there's a question about what cancer was left in your body after surgery.
Okay, so I do believe that there were 6 cancers, different forms. Again, as you know, I'm not very good with names, so I can't tell you what they are. But as I went through the treatment, so that number reduced. Recovery after surgery was quite long, purely because they literally, I joke about it now and say they turned me into a spatchcock chicken. So no stomach muscles. So for a long time, after being quite I love bodyboarding and being in the sea, and it's taken, I still don't bodyboard, just because I believe, my tummy is tender. So I do things now. I canoe, it's much easier. So yes, I have had to adjust, and it did take a long time to heal. I can do about 5 sit-ups now, so I'm very proud of my progress so far. Could I have cured myself without surgery? Yeah, I like to think that I could. I think at the time when he told me and he showed me how big it was, I panicked, and my gut reaction was, get it out, get it out. And the interesting thing, what the surgeon had done when I had a colonoscopy, is he tattooed either side of the tumor, so that when he cut from above, he knew where to cut it out. So maybe it was for my own mental health that I had to get it out.
Also,
for me,
I think the risk with a tumor in the intestines or colon would be obstruction. So if it is something that can be surgically removed, I think obstruction is it's another concern that one's got to consider if you're not going the surgery route. So this is a sort of hypothetical, looking back.
Does that answer your question? Happy with that? I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay. All right, Emma, I think that's it. But honestly, if anyone has any questions and wants to chat, and please feel free to contact me. You've got my number, or Emma as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Evelyn, for so generously and sharing with such truth, and for inspiring us with your journey. And thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed hearing Evelyn's story, and that you will either find it inspirational for somebody that who's going through the journey, and maybe just feel empowered to also look at all the other options. I don't like to call them alternative health or alternative options, but you know, an integrative approach with a team that you trust is always first prize. You will find, if you don't know my social media, Emma.Mentel, health practitioner on Instagram. There's also a YouTube channel, Health and Wellness with Emma Mentel, and I think we will end up uploading this conversation on my YouTube so that you can always refer it and listen back. We will make a recording for those who couldn't attend. But thank you so much for giving up your evening and for joining us for this. And it was lovely to have this. And I hope we can do this again soon. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Emma and
everyone for being
Evelyn. Yeah, thanks, and I look forward to the workshops. I've done like you, Evelyn, and Quentin, who's joined the group, has been a big part of that, and a lot of people have helped me to heal. And yeah, I was a man who ate, drank, did whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted at 57, and then I had to make an adjustment, and I went on the Dr. Sebi diet, and so nutrition's a huge part of it. So thanks for getting us all together tonight.
Wonderful.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Emma, for the invite.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.